Roblox is a game that has existed, technically, for 2 whole decades on the internet, comprising a catalogue of thousands of games made by people of all ages around the world. This in part is responsible for the success that Roblox has garnered over the years, due to an endless amount of games being produced daily for you and your friends to play, spanning over multiple genres. However, one genre in particular that has taken a recent increase in popularity despite the genre being ubiquitous throughout Roblox's existence is horror. Through the course of the website's evolution, horror has always been around in some form, of course in modern times as the renowned Doors or Apeirophobia or The Mimic, each respective game mentioned prior being popular and high quality in their own right. But how did we get here? How have games progressed through the years? Well, it started quite a while ago. Back in the 60s, Roblox creators David Baszucki and Eric Castle were born, though they did not meet until Baszucki started his first company, Knowledge Revolution, in 1989, to which Castle would soon join around December 1998. Not soon after, in January 1999, Knowledge Revolution would be acquired for $20 million by MSC Software Company, of which the two would work at until 2004 when they left to pursue Roblox. Before Roblox, however, Castle and Baszucki would end up deciding between multiple names, i.e. Dynablox and GoBlox. Though I think we know what happened to those names. Die! This year would see the beginning of a little game that would come to not be so little in years to come with the purchase of the domain Roblox.com, with our so-called first games known simply as John's Puzzle Game, with its cute 12 bricks. Yes, 12 bricks. I counted that 12 bricks, as well as Dump Truck. It's a dump truck, what more do you want from me? But if you couldn't tell, these games weren't scary at all. Time skip to August 2006, close to the official release date of Roblox, and we have... What? This is Game of the Year standards for 2006. This is formerly Forest of Desolation, and now known as Abyss's Place, which doesn't matter because the player behind the game is banned. In terms of gameplay, what is considered to be one of the first Roblox horror games is quite lackluster when it comes to it. The game contains an autumn forest surrounding a crumbling tower and serves as an atmospheric experience. A lot of Roblox limitations of the time shine through in the game in the form of small map size, lack of textures, but you'll see as the years pass, quality will improve. Despite its lackluster features, it sowed the seeds for the future of horror games and has saved place in the books as a nostalgic game in Roblox. What 2006 lacked, 2007 made up for with its magnum opus known as Torture Chamber. It's not as bad as it sounds. Torture Chamber is the first quote-unquote myth game, a subgenre of horror in Roblox based around urban legends, if you will, of Roblox accounts which would have a resurgence later in the mid to late 2010s with far more success, but we'll get to that later. This game is made by an account called Spirit in an attempt to be a spooky myth. Unbeknownst to the average Roblox player at the time, this was just beloved Roblox developer Shedletsky doing some minor trolling with his game, featuring textures. Textures of spooky images to blow your socks far off, whilst adding supposed permanent wipeouts to your Roblox account that were essentially your worth as a gamer summed up into a score. The less you had, the better, so it was a big deal at the time, and according to forums, did spook some 10-year-olds, so success, I guess? So anyways, Roblox took notice of the popularity of spookiness and made it a competition. A game to come out of this time is The Undead Coming, a popular game at the time revolving around 2 teams. Zombies and survivors have to battle it out until the opposing team is taken out. I mean, not inherently scary, but we're getting there, okay? Just trust me on this. Another game I want to mention for this section before we do a bit of a time skip is one that is personally iconic to me, and I'm sure a lot of people too. In early 2008, a user known as Icy Fresh would post a game simply known as Underground Base, which would be stolen, rebranded, and become one of the most popular types of horror on the platform for its entire history. Oh no! Area 51 games and their surge during the 2010s, though we'll get to that later once again. Speaking of the 2010s, breaking into the decade, a big improvement to horror games would be made as devs started making games that actually made a proper attempt to scare the player. Though these games would be plagued of loose plots, boring mazes, and a severe case of holding down the W key. But at least we have jump scares now. Speaking of mazes on an unrelated non-linear tangent, this is an issue that I find is still often plaguing horror games of modern Roblox. You see games like The Mimic just be glorified maze simulators and often blend into one another. Even Doors is a glorified maze if you think about it. 2011 saw the introduction of another trend of spooky games, I suppose. Just thought I'd give it a mention, as for a long period of time I personally saw these games pop up everywhere. In May 2011, user DangerTim112 released the game Build to Survive Zombies, where in Build to Survive Zombies, you build to survive zombies. Capiche? This game set the scene for many build to survive popular characters in the future. If there's one collection of games that deserves an honourable mention in the rise of horror games in early Roblox, it's the Bloody Mary series, which is stupidly convoluted and confusing in its own right, and I'm not going to go into complete detail, as I'm sure you can, well, imagine what the plot of the game could possibly be. If not, then it involves going to a mirror in the dark bathroom with just a candle and uttering the words Bloody Mary 3 times in order to summon a spooky ghost. Despite this, the games are considered iconic because of, again, how many times they had been copied and reposted. This game would still unfortunately suffer the same issues mentioned prior as of all the games I've mentioned so far, but they each paved the way forward for Roblox horror games. These games include... I think classing a set of years as the golden age of Roblox is quite subjective, but I think it can be agreed upon that Roblox in the 2010s to mid-2010s was when it was at its peak in terms of enjoyment in games. If you remember, I mentioned the inclusion of creepypastas in Roblox games, and this is heavily due to its peak around this time. Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, Abandoned by Disney, Candle Cove, Smart Dog. I'm sure you've at least heard of one of these at one point in your time on the internet if you didn't jump out of the womb 30 seconds ago. Also, in the previous segment, I included the aforementioned underground base game that I'm sure is nostalgic to almost any 2010s Roblox player, just by the amount of times it was consumed and regurgitated over and over with multiple different creepypastas in the form of Survive the Killers and Area 51 games, which were just the same copy of underground base with free unanimated hovering models of popular characters at the time dotted around the map. Yet it kinda sucked and somehow aged worse than the horror games older than it. Though this wasn't the only creepypasta game to spawn from this era. Slender Sanatorium is another well-praised game from 2013. At the time, developers were only just able to use custom sounds, according to the Roblox wiki. This allowed DePale, the developer of Sanatorium, to create an atmosphere that was praised by Roblox themselves. Despite the tiring amount of creepypasta games, it is undeniable that they played a huge role in perpetuating the popularity of horror on the platform. Ergo, it would be egregious of me not to mention a true pioneer of this genre, that being The Horror Elevator by ZMad Zeus, a game that I'm sure most people watching have at least played once. It continued the trend of mash multiple internet horror staples and memes into a game and hope for the best, but with the fun gimmick of being an elevator and randomly going into differently themed floors with their appropriate character. For example, Lavender Town and the Ghosts of Lavender Town? The game included 24 floors at most. These floors included Sonic.exe, Samara from the Ring, SCPs, Jeff the Killer, Foxy the Pirate, and Al Oni. Video coming soon. Oof. It was well received during the time of an increase in game quality, reaching millions of people interested in being chased by their favourite characters. Kinda weird, though its run would be cut indefinitely by a copyright strike in 2021, meaning it cannot be played anymore. Shame, but this started another trend of games. The blank elevator. Again, this is a type of game I'm sure you've seen or played at least once. One game that I think needs a mention more than any in this era would be 2015's Lightbulb by Zeekers, a top-down psychological thriller that is a maze but is highly regarded for its quality, spooks, and atmosphere, even being nominated for Best Single Player Game of 2016 in the 4th Annual Bloxy Awards. Surprisingly, for a game over 8 years old, it holds up really well and effectively conveys how good horror can and could be on Roblox. I think this game in particular marked the beginning of the true rise of Roblox horror, as it set standards for these games with its quality, creativity, and really showed everyone what you could do with the Roblox engine. So let's talk about these high quality games. One of these is one that is still somewhat active in 2023. Identity Fraud is a 2016 horror game that centers around none other than mazes, puzzles, and monsters. The name comes from the monster in the game that becomes the last player it killed, hoping to catch the unaware off guard by their friends. So yeah, Identity Fraud. Nothing too special, but it does make it apparent that quality was being upheld when it came to horror games, of which you'd see consistent in games released soon after, i.e. Before the Dawn, where everyone has to survive the player whose task is a slasher to kill everyone in a set time, and Flee the Facility, one of the most popular horror games on the platform of all time that is still very active to this day and has a similar concept to Before the Dawn, except the killer is known as the Beast, and it's in a facility setting. I mean, what did you expect? Basically, both Roblox equivalents of Dead by Daylight. Now, I quickly glossed over those big Roblox games to make way for a set of games that I mentioned before. Myth games took a big uprising in 2017 onwards. This would include games covered by popular Roblox creator Flamingo, like The Cult Family, Chuck Lloyd, Goz the Clown, which centered around the characters in games themselves, following a story of some kind, usually in ARG fashion, or in some cases games based around surrealism, games that would try to confuse you or just confuse you. These games included Mugen or the obscure game Vestiseg. These games just focus on being obscure, and the horror comes from unknown or confusion. They're obscure and meaningless at surface level, but just have a feeling of unease. Essentially Roblox's version of creepypastas, which eventually died out to my knowledge, though the obscure surreal games are here to stay. Recent years have really shown a boom in quality, not just horror but Roblox games as a whole. The tools available to developers now are way more powerful and advanced compared to those seen before them. Games that don't even seem possible on a silly Lego game are being applauded for their graphics and mechanics, something that didn't seem possible just a few years ago. So why not kick off this section with 2019's 3008 by Ugly Burger Zero, a game in the modern era that I think exemplifies that the roots of horror on the platform can still be seen in recent games. For example, the 3008 in the name refers to the SCP of corresponding number, and the gameplay consists of building a base to survive, two mechanics that have almost been like a staple of Roblox horror since the early 2010s. SCP-3008 is set in an infinite IKEA, but in this game it's a Rokia so they don't get sued. It visually looks great, but the actual game itself is quite surreal, and the experience itself is worth playing at least once. You can tell this by the fact that it has over 1 billion visits and overall has good reception. I think it would be wrong of me to not mention another game from 2019 known as The Mirror. The Mirror is a psychological horror game that is probably the first on this list to give you a proper spook. Did I get you? Leave a comment down below if I did. The game focuses on a real world phenomenon of which you can try yourself. The idea is to stare at yourself in the mirror whilst in a dimly lit room. Essentially, because the average human self-loathing is so high, your brain starts to get bored and begins to distort what you see until eventually the person in the mirror is not yourself. So yeah, this game does that times 1,000. It's probably the scariest game on the list so far because of its interesting and unique and realistic grounded concept. Now unfortunately, one game that is necessary to mention, despite my own dislike, which does not mean the game is bad, is Piggy. Piggy is the biggest horror game of all time on Roblox, with an unfathomable almost 12 billion visits as of writing this, which is the 13th of August, spawning multiple chapters, real-world toys, and books. It's inspired by Peppa Pig and also the game Granny, which became quite big, especially on kids' YouTube channels, with the gameplay of previously mentioned titles like Flee the Facility or Before the Dawn. A mix of two massive children IPs is indicative of instant success, and it became the fastest Roblox game to hit 1 billion visits. Will it scare you? Now, back onto a high note. The Mimic! Woo, yeah! The Mimic is a game released in 2021 that will scare your socks off. It is highly regarded as being one of the most high quality horror games on the platform. The developers thought instead of using internet urban legends, why not see the outside world for the first time and make one based on Japanese urban legends? And so, the first of many multi-chapter games to come in this time was born. I will admit, it's a very good looking game with decent scares and some tension, but god damn it, why do there always have to be mazes? You can still see the consequences of this game in current times with so many chapter-based horror games with varying degree of quality. Honestly, looking for a spook recently has led me to these games, and they're just meh. Most of the time, they don't really engage me much, and some are pretty bad. Here are a couple of examples. Last year in 2022, we saw a rise in another trend of horror games. If I put an image on the screen, you'll probably know what I'm talking about instantly, even if you don't even play Roblox. This is because the idea of Nextbot didn't originate in Roblox, but in Garry's mod, the Half-Life 2 sandbox mod that has been around almost as long as Roblox. Nextbot doesn't refer to the thing that's chasing you, but instead the use of navigation meshes instead of typical nodes on NPCs in Garry's mod. If it sounds complicated, you're not the only one. That's why we all just called Nextbots the spooky PNGs that chase you. Specific videos that became the most popular showcasing this mod were ones that included the player running for their lives from spooky or meme images. So they saw that and mashed it into Roblox. You may have heard of these games, and there's Vade or Nico's Nextbots. There's not much more to say really. I mean, in Garry's mod it's quite tense, but this is a Roblox video, so... Doors! Doors is a game that has been out for a little over a year now, and has been one of the most successful games in Roblox recently. It's highly regarded by both the community and myself. This is because of its appealing and stylized look, extremely fun and enjoyable nature, unique gameplay and replayability. It's actually the game that reinvigorated my interest in Roblox. Even better, it can be pretty spooky or tense at times, with areas requiring you to run, hide, sneak, and pray for your damn life. Honestly, probably my favourite game on the platform by a long shot, and is one of the best examples of how good Roblox horror can be. Now, one final game I wanted to talk about in this video, before it gets too long, came to my attention by the YouTuber Sting, who is known for playing spooky games in Roblox, and is great to watch the fun games to play. Came out as recently as July 2023, and kind of perfectly takes us back to the beginning of the video. Cyclical structure. This game is called Faithless, and it focuses on using the old aesthetic of Roblox while simultaneously being able to spook you occasionally. You are given a crucifix which is like your own magic wand and is used to interact with the world around you. For example, vanquishing a dead body and a gravestone of evil to get a key. The game centers around a boy called Billy. Billy is no ordinary boy and is in fact possessed, and it's your job to do something about it, so get out there and save him. The game can be quite weird or unsettling and pays homage to the roots of Roblox. Despite its clear influence from the horror game Faith, the original game of similar concept and influence of retro graphics, it still does well as its own standalone title. Horror has been a staple of Roblox since its inception, and it's clear by its popularity that it's here to stay, and I'm personally all for it. Games have really improved both graphically and functionally since Forest of Desolation, and have a genuine ability to scare the player. Then again, at some point in time, all these old games were able to provide scares once. Remember Torture Chamber from 2007, when the game looked like this? You can see forum posts of kids actually scared by it. Though it's safe to say some games are more dated than others at this point, they will not be forgotten in their contribution towards the evolution of horror games on Roblox and the platform in general. And these games will continue to evolve and improve over time as popularity is upheld with the millions of daily users. And even if they don't, anything is better than those god-awful simulators everywhere. Jesus Christ.